In this tutorial, we'll have a look at setting preferences. And so I've got my splash screen open, ready to set my preferences. So here, where it says recent projects, I'll click on iPhone View number 1 project. And then of course, once my user interface opens up, to be able to access preferences, I simply need to come up here, click on Edit, and then roll down to the bottom where it says Preferences. And there you'll see separate categories ranging from General at the top and then down to Appearance, and below that is Audio, and running all the way down to the bottom of this list we have the option to Trim. Anyway, what I'll do in this tutorial is talk you through some of the preference settings, for example the one labelled as General. Actually, just before I talk through the general settings, notice that the 15 separate categories are situated here down the left-hand column of this Preferences dialog box, allowing you to easily move to a particular preference to make any adjustments you feel necessary for the way you prefer to work. And as an exact emulation of the categories we saw a few moments ago, then you'll see we have these other categories too. Appearance, for example, is second in the list, followed by Audio and then Audio Hardware, etc, etc. Let me go back to the General tab at the top of the Preferences dialog box here, because I want to look at these settings that we can see on the right-hand side of the user interface. For example, we can see that the video transition default duration is set to 25 frames. And because I'm working in the United Kingdom with the PAL video format, then 25 frames translates to 1 second of film footage. If you are working in the United States, then for 1 second film footage you will need very nearly 30 frames per second, 29.97 frames per second. Notice below the video transition default duration, we see a preference for audio transition duration, and the default here is set to 1 second. And the third option down is where we set our still image default duration, and you can see that this is set to 125 frames at the present time. And the 125 frames translates to 5 seconds when we are working at 25 frames per second. Now, I know we haven't brought anything into the timeline yet, or indeed to our project, but this is the setting here for when we want to bring a photograph or an illustration onto our timeline. This doesn't mean we can't adjust this, because of course we can. This is just the default duration that we can use. If I want to change it, then it's very simple to do that. All I would need to do is highlight it first of all, and then change it to something that I think is more appropriate for my way of working. For example, I could change this to 100 frames, and of course this translates to 4 seconds when we are working at 25 frames per second. Now, I'm not going to go through every single preference setting here. I'm simply showing you where the general preferences are and what they mean. For example, when we have our project playing and the current time indicator reaches the end of the timeline that is in view, then we can set it here where it says Timeline Playback Auto Scrolling to either Page Scroll, as it is here, or by clicking on this drop reveal, change this to No Scroll, or the third option, Smooth Scroll. Now I'll leave it at Page Scroll. So what I suggest is just read these description lines and adjust your preferences as necessary to suit your projects. That said, perhaps one of the preferences that I do like to change is this one here, where it says Play Work Area after rendering previews. As you can see at the present time, the checkbox is unchecked. And this means, of course, that once we render a clip, then leaving this unchecked means playback won't occur. Now I prefer it this way, but some people do like to have this checkbox checked, meaning that once the render process has taken place, then immediately playback starts so that you can see the effect of smooth playback owing to a render preview being created. So as I say, just work your way through these fairly self-explanatory preference settings, making changes as necessary to the way you like to work. Let's just move to the appearance section. I'll click here, and now you'll see over the top that we have a brightness slider, and if you drag it to the right, of course, it goes lighter, as indicated, and that's too much for my eyes, so I'll hit the default button to take us back to the darker view. Okay? And as I say, just work your way down these different categories here on the left-hand side. Audio, for example, as you can see on the right-hand side, once audio is selected, then you get a number of different preference settings that you can adjust or change in some way. This one here, for example, play audio while scrubbing. Well, it's checked at the moment, but if I uncheck it, that will mean that when I'm scrubbing with my CTI across the timeline, then because this is now unchecked, I won't actually hear the audio. And that can be useful when really you're just focusing on the visual element of your video clip, and scrubbing quickly across the timeline means that you won't be distracted by the audio running at 3 or 4 times the speed as well, however fast you are dragging your CTI across the timeline. If you are focused on finding a particular point, however, in your clip that is indicated by sound, then you'll want to be able to find that particular point easily. So having this checked would mean that you can quickly drag your CTI back and across the timeline until you find the particular point that you are searching for. Now I'm going to leave all the other settings here for audio set to the default. And again, with the audio hardware preference setting here, well, you can see the default device at the moment is set to Premiere Pro WDM Sound, but clicking on here allows you to search out the particular audio driver on your system linked to whatever your sound card is. Now, as I keep saying, I'm going to let you explore all these preference settings for yourself, and that's how easy it is to just work your way through and find any preference settings that you want to change to be able to make your changes as necessary.